Welcome to another recap. The movie we're bringing to you today is Charlie St. Cloud, a supernatural drama film released in 2010. The story begins with a boy named Charlie who is participating in a boating competition with his younger brother Sam. Among the competitors is Charlie's classmate, Tess, who seems to have a crush on him. Charlie wins the race and earns a sailing scholarship to Stanford University. Charlie and Sam share a deep bond, always teasing and supporting each other. Since their father left them with their mother, Charlie has been more than just a brother to Sam. He's also his best friend. When Sam learns Charlie will be leaving for college, he becomes upset. Charlie, too, doesn't want to part from his brother, but he knows he has no choice. To cheer Sam up, Charlie promises to practice baseball catch with him for an hour every day until college starts. One evening, before heading to college, Charlie plans to attend a party with his friends. However, his mother is scheduled for a double shift at work and asks Charlie to stay home and look after Sam. After she leaves, Charlie sneaks out at night, intending to go to the party. As Charlie tries to leave quietly, Sam catches him and insists on being dropped off at a friend's house. Reluctantly, Charlie agrees and starts driving with Sam. While merging onto the highway, their car gets into a horrific accident with a truck due to another driver's mistake. The car flips multiple times across the road. In the next scene, Charlie is seen in an emergency medical van. On the monitor, his lifeline is flat. Yet a paramedic doesn't give up and seems to hope for a miracle. Suddenly, Charlie regains consciousness. The paramedic looks relieved and kisses a medallion around his neck in gratitude. When Charlie wakes up, his first thought is for his brother. He looks around and spots Sam lying nearby, lifeless. Overcome with grief, Charlie cries uncontrollably, repeating that he can't leave his brother behind. At Sam's funeral, Charlie is asked to place Sam's baseball and glove in the grave. Instead, overcome with emotion, he runs off into the woods, crying. He collapses on the ground, but when he looks up, he sees Sam standing in front of him. Sam smiles and says Charlie is late for their practice session. Seeing Sam again brings a smile to Charlie's face. He promises Sam that no matter what happens, he will meet him every evening at sunset. Fast forward 5 years, and Charlie is now working as a caretaker in the same cemetery where his brother Sam was buried. Since the accident, Charlie hasn't gone to college, nor has he stepped foot on a boat. His mother moved away, but Charlie chose to stay behind. One morning, as Charlie heads to work at the cemetery, he meets his colleague and close friend, Alistair, another caretaker. While at work, Charlie runs into Tess, the girl who had a crush on him back in high school. She's upset with Alistair about the flowers placed on her father's grave. However, when Tess notices Charlie, her demeanor softens immediately. Charlie assures her he'll personally take care of the flowers. Later, when Charlie goes to place the flowers on Tess's father's grave, he meets Sullivan, a high school friend who is now an army officer. They begin chatting, but Alistair notices something strange. Charlie is talking to no one. Sullivan had died in the line of duty, and Charlie knew this well. Yet he often saw and spoke to him as if he were still alive. This wasn't unusual to Alistair, as he had grown accustomed to Charlie's solitary conversations. That evening, as the sun sets, Charlie picks up his baseball glove and heads into the woods. There, just like every day, he meets Sam to practice baseball. They play, talk, and eventually splash around in a nearby pond. But when the hour is up, Sam disappears, and Charlie emerges from the water alone. The next day, while leaving a store, Charlie encounters the paramedic who had saved his life years ago. His name is Florio Ferrante. Florio invites Charlie for coffee and asks him about the last 5 years of his life. He tells Charlie that his second chance at life is for a special purpose, one that can't be fulfilled by staying in the cemetery. Florio's words strike a chord with Charlie. He was once a gifted student with limitless potential, yet he chose to give it all up to be with Sam. Even though Charlie knew deep down that Sam wasn't truly alive, their daily hour together was the most important part of his life. Later, while walking by the harbor, Charlie sees Tess preparing her boat for an upcoming competition. It's a significant race, and seeing Tess pursue her dream reminds Charlie of his own aspirations. Participating in such competitions was once his dream too. That evening, Charlie talks to Sam about Tess and her boat. He even takes a magazine to show Sam, sharing his admiration for her determination. Later that night, Charlie visits the harbor and begins sketching Tess's boat. Alistair interrupts him and takes him to an anniversary party. At the party, two of Charlie's old high school classmates mock him. They taunt him, saying that the once brilliant boating champion hasn't changed at all and is still stuck in the same place. Angered by the taunts, Charlie kicks one of his classmates out of the party. Later, he returns to the harbor and stands near Tess's boat, reminiscing about his glory days when he used to sail. Lost in thought, he's startled when Tess suddenly emerges from her boat. This time, they engage in a confident and heartfelt conversation. When Tess notices the drawing of her boat in Charlie's hand, she realizes he admires her. Charlie wishes her good luck for her race and leaves. The next day, Tess heads out for race practice with her boat. Despite her coach warning her about an impending storm, she decides to continue, believing it's the perfect opportunity to test her boat's resilience. Turning off her communication device, she ventures into the storm. That evening, Charlie goes to meet Sam as usual. While practicing baseball, it begins to rain heavily. Instead of stopping, the brothers laugh and play in the rain, enjoying the moment. The following morning, while at the cemetery, Charlie makes a loud noise to scare off some birds. This startles Tess, who is sleeping near her father's grave. She wakes up disoriented, with a visible injury on her forehead. Charlie notices her condition and takes her to his cottage. He cleans her wound and applies some medicine. Tess explains that she got caught in the storm last night while out on her boat. She tries to talk to Charlie about his personal life, but he avoids the conversation, as he's eager to meet Sam soon. As Tess prepares to leave, she mentions that she'll only be able to see him again in 6 months after her race. Hearing this, Charlie rushes after her and invites her over for dinner that evening. After spending time with Sam as usual, Charlie has dinner with Tess at his cottage. During their meal, Tess notices a box filled with items and asks about them. Charlie explains that the items belong to his brother Sam. As the evening progresses, the two grow closer, but just as things begin to deepen, Tess decides it's time to leave. Charlie doesn't stop her, and she walks out. Moments later, there's a knock on Charlie's door. He hears Tess's voice calling to him from the dark woods, urging him to find her. They play a playful game of hide-and-seek in the forest, which eventually leads them to a quiet corner where they surrender to their growing love for each other. The next morning, Charlie wakes up in the forest, but this time, he's alone. When Charlie reaches his cottage, he finds a paper hanging on his door. On one side is a sketch of a boat, and on the other side it says, "Come and find me." Curious and excited, Charlie rushes to the harbor, where he spots Tess sitting on a boat. Without hesitation, he joins her. For the first time in 5 years, Charlie takes the helm and drives a boat again. The experience fills him with joy, and he thanks Tess for helping him relive his passion. As they sail, Tess recites a poem and explains that it was her father's favorite. They talk for hours, losing track of time. For the first time since the accident, Charlie forgets about his evening ritual with Sam. As the cannonball drops to signal sunset, Charlie suddenly realizes the time and bolts toward the forest. When he reaches the usual spot, he sees Sam walking away. Desperate, Charlie calls out to him and stops him. Sam, visibly upset, cries and accuses Charlie of forgetting him. He says that without their time together, he feels like he's disappearing. Charlie, guilt-ridden, promises Sam that it will never happen again. Just then, Tess appears behind him. She sees Charlie talking, but to her, there's no one else there. Finally understanding the situation, Tess gently holds Charlie's hand and tells him, "Everyone has to leave someday. You have to let Sam go." But Charlie pulls away and says, "I can't lose him." Without another word, he runs after Sam deeper into the forest. The next day, Tess decides to visit Charlie. On her way, she spots an old friend and calls out to her, but the friend doesn't respond. It's as if she doesn't see or hear Tess at all. Confused, Tess notices a nearby shop window and looks into the mirror, only to realize with shock that her reflection isn't there. Meanwhile, Charlie is at a cafe with Alistair, sipping coffee and discussing life. Their conversation is interrupted when some police officers enter with Tess's coach. The coach explains that Tess and her boat have been missing at sea for 3 days. Charlie, stunned, runs to Tess's father's grave, hoping to find her there. Sure enough, Tess appears, looking just as she did the last time he saw her, confused and disoriented. Tess, however, now realizes the truth. She struggles to accept that she's no longer alive. Charlie tells Tess that the bright light she saw wasn't the light of death, but the light from Cape Flattery. Hearing this, Tess begins to cry and slowly fades away, leaving Charlie devastated. Overwhelmed by grief, he returns home and throws everything around in frustration. That evening, he goes to the forest to meet Sam with a baseball and gloves. As they play, he tells Sam about Tess's death, lost in his sorrow. Later that night, Florio's wife visits Charlie and informs him about Florio's passing. She hands him a medallion that belonged to Florio, saying he wanted Charlie to have it. The medallion depicts Saint Jude, the patron saint of lost causes and hope in despair. As Charlie examines it, his gaze falls on the note Tess had left for him. "Come and find me." Suddenly it dawns on him. Tess isn't dead. She might still be alive but in a coma, and she was trying to guide him to her before she lost consciousness. Without wasting time, Charlie rushes to Alistair and explains his theory. They quickly gather Tess's coach, Dink, and head to the harbor. Just as they're about to take Tess's boat, Dink stops them, questioning their plan. He argues that Cape Flattery is 20 kilometers from her last known location. Despite his doubts, Dink joins them, hoping Charlie is right. As evening falls, Sam waits in the forest for Charlie. After waiting for hours, he walks away, heartbroken. But as he leaves, a radiant, beautiful world appears before him, showing every joyful moment he spent with Charlie. Filled with peace, Sam smiles and disappears into a bright light. Meanwhile, on the boat, Charlie feels a wave of sadness as he thinks of Sam. He apologizes aloud, looking at the sky. At that moment, he spots a shooting star and takes it as a sign from Sam, guiding him toward Tess. Charlie tells Dink to steer the boat toward where the star seemed to fall. Confused but trusting, Dink follows Charlie's instructions. Night falls, and they see a distant light. It's the lighthouse on Cape Flattery. Charlie's hope reignites. He realizes the light Tess saw before blacking out wasn't the light of death but this very lighthouse. When they reach the area, they find Tess's boat wrecked against the rocks. The waves are fierce, and the water is freezing. Alistair urges Charlie to wait for medical help, but Charlie refuses, saying he was given a second chance at life for moments like this. Without hesitation, he dives into the icy waters. Inside the boat, Charlie doesn't find Tess. Desperate, he climbs onto the rocks and finally discovers her lying unconscious. Her body is cold, but he feels a faint pulse. To keep her warm, he holds her tightly against his chest until the rescue helicopter arrives. Charlie wakes up later in a hospital bed. His first question is about Tess. Alistair reassures him that she's alive and recovering well. Relieved, Charlie visits Tess at her house after being discharged. Tess is overjoyed to see him and thanks him for saving her life. Charlie invites her for a ride on his boat, but she hesitates, admitting she's been having strange dreams about him since waking up. In her dreams, she says, they were together, and everything felt real. Charlie smiles and reveals that those weren't just dreams, they were her memories. Tess is confused until Charlie recites the poem she once told him, her father's favorite. Surprised and emotional, she agrees to go with him on the boat. That evening, Charlie returns to the forest where he used to meet Sam. He apologizes for breaking his promise to always be there. Though Sam doesn't appear, his voice echoes from behind, assuring Charlie that it's okay and he's at peace. Sam tells Charlie to live his life fully, promising they'll always be brothers. With a heavy heart but newfound peace, Charlie says goodbye to Sam and leaves with Tess. The movie ends with a message of love, letting go, and new beginnings.